Welcome back to another episode of the Ball Fake Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and support our new movement by putting Let's Go Viral in the comment section. But if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. But without further ado, here are your hosts, Nicely Chunga Benny and Greg King.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Ball Fake Podcast. Today, we're going to be dissecting the Lauri Markkanen trade to the Cleveland Cavaliers. But before we hop into all that, we got to give a quick shout out to our subscriber today, as always. And today, it's going to be DZ. Thank you so much, bro, for like, commenting, subscribing, turning on post notification, and showing so much love and support towards our YouTube channel and our podcast overall. We greatly appreciate it. Now, Greg, obviously, there was a 3-team trade, just a few days ago with Lauri Markkanen, Derrick Jones Jr., and Larry Nance Jr. out of Cleveland. What are your overall thoughts on this trade for the Cleveland Cavaliers, just to start off with?
I think it's an even trade all around. I think the Cavs are bringing in a guy like Markkanen who showed some promise with the Bulls. Just didn't really pan out there. Got injured and just in and out of the lineup and just wasn't really utilizing the offense that much. So he's coming to a new scenery with them, and the Cavs are just looking to get bigger, get taller, get more physical down there, and bring in more height on that front court. So that's paired with Jarrett Allen, and now they have Evan Mobley. But bringing a guy like Lauri Markkanen, seems like Kevin Love's going to be out of there soon to replace him, and you get a guy in Lauri Markkanen who has some potential, has some promise in 2018, averaged 18 points, can stretch it out a little bit, can hit some corner threes, has a decent in-between game, can put the ball on the ground a little bit, but has some promise on the offensive end. It's just what I'm worried about his defensive side. Can he develop that, and how will the lineups pan out with him on the floor? Losing a guy like Larry Nance is going to hurt, especially with that versatility and the length that Larry Nance brings on the floor. So I'm literally I'm interested to see how this works, especially with the contract that he got too. 4 years, $64 million, I believe. So they're going to have to figure out how this is going to work going forward.
Yeah, it was 4 years, $67 million, just to correct you, Greg. But, the Cleveland Cavaliers, this is just another Cleveland Cavaliers type of move, if you ask me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of negatives to, this overall trade, if you ask me, in my opinion. I feel like, from a positive standpoint, they make room for Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen in the front court, because it could get a little bit cramped down there when you have all those bigs. I don't know why Cleveland, acquired so many big men between the last 2 seasons with, Andre Drummond, Jarrett Allen, all these guys. But I'm glad, they were able to free up some of that space, especially, getting rid of a guy like Larry Nance, just because he probably isn't going to be there for the foreseeable future. And, you don't want to lose him for nothing, because he probably would have left in free agency, given the fact that, he was entering the last year of his contract. But at least, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're getting a floor spacer in Lauri Markkanen, and, he's going to be able to add some size to this lineup. And, he's going to be able to, also interchange with the bigs. He can play with Evan Mobley as potentially a small ball 5. I probably don't really like that lineup too much.
Me either.
Just because defensively it could be really inefficient. But Lauri Markkanen, most importantly, he fits the timeline with the rest of these young guys. Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, all these guys, they're around the same age range. But I think some of the biggest negatives to take away from this is the fact that the fit offensively is going to be really weird. How are they going to implement Lauri Markkanen within the offense without taking away too many shots from, guys like Darius Garland? What is the situation going to be like with Colin Sexton? Is he going to be returning heading into next season? And then you also have to still wait on the development of Evan Mobley. You have to see how he looks. And then Jarrett Allen, he's working on his offensive game as well. So, there's just a lot of things that, you kind of have to point to that could, be really big question marks. But I think the biggest thing, concern-wise, in my opinion, is the fact that, you paid him $67 million and he's not a perfect fit. You typically don't do that if you're a GM in the NBA. Lonzo Ball, he's going to fit well with the, Chicago Bulls at $85 million. You don't typically, do that when it comes to, guys that are just unsure fits. And, that's kind of my biggest criticism out of this entire thing from the Cleveland Cavaliers standpoint. But, what are your final thoughts on that specifically?
Yeah, I think the contract to me was alarming as well. And I just want to see how everything fits. I don't know what option he would be, maybe the third option, but we just have to figure out how they're going to utilize him, because if it goes to the situation like he was in the Bulls, it's going to be a nightmare going forward for them. So we'll see how that pans out. But switching over to like the Trailblazers and the Bulls, what do you think about that? Because I think for the Trailblazers, adding a guy like Larry Nance, we saw that the Trailblazers really struggled with closing out games on the defensive end and putting putting people away in the regular season, even in the playoffs. So I think adding a guy like Larry Nance will definitely help them out going forward.
Yeah, defensively, he's definitely going to feel a need. I mean, he's easily the better defender between him and Derrick Jones Jr. for sure. I mean, and on top of that, this is a guy that's more versatile on both ends of the basketball. He's really good in, screen and dive action. He's got a low usage percentage on the offensive end of the basketball. He kind of stays out of the way, but he still manages to be productive. This is a guy that assisted on 15% of his teammates' points in the last 3 seasons. So he's very versatile from that standpoint, and he's also a playmaker to a certain degree. But I think most importantly, him being ranked 6th in deflections last year and second highest steals rate among big men in the entire NBA is one of those eye-popping things that's really going to be beneficial for the Portland Trailblazers. I mean, you're talking about the second worst defense in the NBA.
Yeah.
Acquiring a guy that's going to significantly help them from that standpoint and not giving up too much in Derrick Jones Jr. So I definitely like that pick. And, especially just given the fact that, he's also athletic. So you're not going to be missing out on those high value lobs that you were getting from Derrick Jones Jr. Might not be as entertaining because, Derrick Jones Jr. definitely a phenomenal athlete and everything. But, I mean, you're also getting a rebounder and you're getting a better three-point shooter, 36% from the field. Probably doesn't move the needle too much, especially if Damian Lillard ends up leaving next season. But I think as of right now, Larry Nance Jr. is the right guy to be in Portland.
That's what the question for me is how is it going to affect them going into the playoffs? Like, is this move and the moves that they made over offseason really going to move the needle for them to be in a position where they can take that next step in the Western Conference? But we just have to see it. And moving on to the Bulls, I like what the Bulls did, bringing a guy in like Derrick Jones Jr., who's athletic, very long, gets after it. But what I really like about it is that they got picks back. I mean, they got a team that's still rebuilding, trying to rebuild around Zach LaVine and hoping that he will stay long term for the future. But acquiring more picks and getting more assets, more draft capital is going to definitely help this team finish out this roster going forward for the future around this young core.
Yeah, I was really happy to see them, redeem some of those picks that they were giving up last year because, last year at the trade deadline, they had to give up quite a few, just to get Nikola Vucevic in return. And then obviously this year, you had to give up a few players and some picks to acquire Alonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan, obviously. But I mean, the end-all be-all, those picks really don't hold too much value. I mean, it will be nice, use those as trade bait in the near future and everything. But as far as Derrick Jones Jr. in Chicago, I love it. I love it. I mean, offensively, you're already taken care of with, the additions that you made this offseason in free agency and everything, acquiring Lonzo Ball, a 3-point marksman, DeMar DeRozan, a guy that's a mid-range cheeser, can play the power forward position and start for you from that standpoint. You're going to have a lot of options offensively. So for you guys to be able to, come in, acquire some picks for the near future, and then also be able to get a defensive player in Derrick Jones Jr., I got to love it.
Yeah, me too. I love it. And if they utilize him how he was using in Miami, I think he can really flourish with Lonzo. Because getting up and down the court with Lonzo is very exciting to see, especially with the players that we've seen him play with, like a Zion and all these high flyers, and who can go up and get the basketball. So I'm excited to see what Chicago does going forward.
Yeah, and this is a guy that, he's definitely going to be able to thrive in transition. This is going to be a league pass team with Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, and, Derrick Jones Jr. from that perspective. But, I mean, he's also an upgrade from Lauri Markkanen, not only defensively, but, in some other areas offensively. But most importantly, this is a guy that, he's good on ball when it comes to, just obtaining and making sure, he's keeping his man in front of him. This is a guy that he's one of the best help defenders or underrated help defenders in the entire NBA, in my opinion, especially when it comes to shot blocking at his position. This is a guy, he's a little bit undersized as a power forward, but the length and the athleticism definitely helps him, be productive on that side of the basketball. But I think, another perspective that, a lot of people aren't really mentioning is the fact that, Derrick Jones Jr., he's going to be a 1-year rental more than likely. This is kind of a trial run right now because he's on an expiring contract, $9.7 million left on his contract and everything. But, the positive about that is the fact that, the Bulls, they still have $6 million below the luxury tax to work with. So they could sign another free agent that, is a veteran that could possibly, come in and play that power forward position. Maybe a guy like, Paul Millsap out of Denver. I think he's the perfect fit for the Chicago Bulls right now. But I mean, we'll just have to wait and see what they do the rest of this offseason. Yeah. They should make some more moves to fill out the roster. Yeah, we talked about that in our past episodes. Most definitely. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ball Fake Podcast. We greatly appreciate the love and support that we've been getting as of late. If you're new to our YouTube channel or you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, turn on post notification, and give us a 5-star rating and a nice little review. But besides that, it's your boy Nicey Chungabini. I'm here with my co-host Greg King, and we out.
We out.